Great. Well, thanks again, everybody, for being here. We're excited to have you. As we do with our ArcGIS workshops, I like to orient us all to who we are, so you'll know a little bit more about us. And we, the ArcGIS team, I'm going to show you all of their faces in a moment, are a statewide program, part of UCANR, which is the University of California Agricultural and Natural Resources group. And this is a quite large group that has academics and staff throughout California. We are in cooperative extension offices, in research and extension centers, and on affiliated UC campuses. And we all do applied research that seeks to help California communities and improve the life of those of us who live in California. And there's a lot of statewide programs. Some of you may have heard of CalFresh or UC IPM or 4-H. Those are all statewide programs under UCANR, and ours is the Informatics and GIS program, IGIS. And we're all just GIS and spatial data fanatics. And we just love helping people use this technology in their everyday work. And we do that through these kinds of trainings. We also have a service center where we can help you finish projects. We do research projects. We fly a lot of drones. We're really a resource for you. And so thank you for joining us today. Here's who we are. You've met Sean. Sean Hogan is going to be running the hands-on portion of the workshop. I'm Maggie Kelly. I'm the director of the ArcGIS team. And then behind the scenes, we've got Shane Fire, Robert Johnson, and Ben Satzman. They're all there to help you. So if you are like, what's going on? I missed a step. You can say that, and Sean can repeat it, or you can go, I'm not getting this. I need help. And one of us can pop in and answer your question or make things a little bit smoother. And who you are, you're a bunch of folks. You're mostly from California. There's a few from outside California, but we always do this with our ArcGIS workshops. We'd love it if you would put in the chat your name, what you hope to learn from this workshop, if it's brief, and then your experience with Pro, from 1 being beginner to 5 being expert. So let's start that roll on. I got the chat open here. Who would like to start and tell us a little bit about themselves? Yay, Cecilia. Start us off.
Okay, so my name's
You could just put it in chat. Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't know. All right.
Yeah, put it in chat and everybody will just kind of roll through. So who wants to go first and put it in chat? And let us know your name and your level with ArcGIS Pro, 1 to 5. I usually have a quicker off the mark than this. All right, here we go. Great. We got beginners. Ooh, excellent, Cecilia. That's great. We love self-taught GIS people. So I've got 2 of you. The rest of you are very shy. Well, I'll keep going. Oh, great. Barb, lovely. Okay, terrific. Terrific, Richard. Hey, Barb, welcome to A&R. Thrilled to meet you. Great. I'm going to close my chat so I can keep going, but keep that up if you guys care to tell us a little bit more about yourselves. So why might you want to learn ArcGIS Pro? And there's lots of reasons. These are some of my favorites. I love the fact that the design capabilities are really strong in Pro, so you can produce publication quality maps. You've got a lot more control over the cartography and design. You might be working with lots of data and different projections, and you want to really pay attention to that. Pro does that really well. I'm going to talk about that in a moment. You might want to do some really advanced analysis in a GIS package. So things like image processing with remotely sensed imagery, or spatial modeling, or working with multiple data types, or working in a reproducible way, or incorporating coding into your GIS workflow. All of these might be reasons why you're going to use Pro. It's a wonderful package, and it's so deep and very powerful. But, you know, there are some things that it doesn't do well. It can have a steep learning curve to work with completely, sort of like a lifelong commitment. Some of the more advanced reproducibility work requires coding. So everything we're going to do today does not. We're going to be just working in the GUI, but you can take it a lot farther if you do some of the work using a coding environment. It's not the most nimble of software. Sometimes it can feel like a big sort of behemoth. It can seem like it's incomprehensible. I prefer Pro a lot to ArcMap, the previous version. I find it a lot more streamlined and it's more intuitive to me, but it still can be kind of a large entity. It's not free, you know, it does cost money, but all these things said, we still really do love it for the power and the beauty of the products that we can create. So what we're going to do today is I'm going to talk about, we've already done the introductions. I'm going to talk a little bit about Esri. I'm going to talk about what we're going to do today with our data. And the data comes from the Lynn Cove Research and Extension Center down in the Central Valley. I'm going to talk a little bit about the basics of GIS. This will be a review for some of you. We're going to touch on data. We're going to touch on projections, some of the analysis that we can do in GIS, and then the design and cartography aspects. And then this will be very brief, and then we're going to open it up to the hands-on workshop, and that's what Sean's going to run. And he's going to give us an overview, sort of orient you to Pro if you're new to it, and then orient you to the data. We're going to create some maps. We're going to load data. We're going to check out where we can find data via Esri, which is a real strength. And then we're going to do some work with features and shapefiles and some joins and some queries and do some interpolation. So we're going to be working with ArcGIS Pro today, and ArcGIS Pro is an Esri software. Esri is the largest GIS company in the world, and Pro is their flagship desktop GIS package that we're going to be working on today. It requires a license, which is what we're sort of struggling with right now. Its strengths are in cartography, projection control, all these advanced analyses I was talking about, reproducibility, coding. That's where we're going to be today. But we do also, when we're talking about Esri, always have to remember that there's desktop GIS and there's cloud-based GIS. And the cloud-based GIS platform that Esri supports is called ArcGIS Online. And often we go back and forth between these two versions of GIS. And if you're working in ArcGIS Online, we just completed the ArcGIS Online workshop a few weeks ago. The strengths of ArcGIS Online are creating web maps and web apps, links to loads of apps like field maps if you want to collect data in the field. There's increasing numbers of analyses every day. It's really impressive what you can do in a cloud environment. It's very fast, it's very intuitive, and it's browser-based. So today we're going to be relying more on this desktop model, but I do want you to keep in mind the GIS world is basically moving to the cloud, and the way it's moving to the cloud in Esri is with ArcGIS Online. So just a quick intro to where we're going to be at. We're going to be working today with data from the Lynn Cove Research and Extension Center. It's down in the Central Valley near Parlier, south of Fresno. It's a citrus, mostly has a lot of crops, but prioritizes experimental plots with citrus. So a lot of citrus varietals are coming out of Lynn Cove, and it's a fun data set to work with. You're going to be working with some digital surface models created from UAV imagery that we flew, and digital surface models are the sort of top of the trees and everything you can see on top of the land. We're going to be working with point layers that come in the form of a data table that we're going to convert then to a shapefile. And we're also going to look at some pretty UAV imagery that we flew using a multispectral camera, and then the resulting products, a digital surface model, a digital terrain model, and what's called NDVI, which is a remote sensing index that gets at vegetation vigor and greenness. You're going to be finding data and loading data, both local data and cloud data. You're going to play around with it. You're going to do some joins and working with tables and spatial data. You're going to do some querying. You're going to do some interpolation, and you're going to make a fancy map, something like this one. This is what Pro is going to look like when you get it open. It's a real game changer if you're used to working with ArcMap, and I told you before, I really find it more intuitive. It has your table of contents on the left. It has this catalog that Sean briefly introduced already. Those are going to be your anchors, and he's going to go through this. And then at the top, there's this ribbon where you're going to find all of the things that you need to do with GIS. So you're going to get the hang of this, and you'll see the method to how this whole software is set up. Let's do a quick intro background to GIS, Geographical Information Systems. They've been around for a while. They are computer systems for the acquisition, management, analysis, and dissemination of geospatial data. This picture on the right, this kind of cartoon, you've seen it in a million intro to GIS textbooks. The idea here is that we take the 3D world and we strip it into these two-dimensional layers that we can then reassemble because they are georeferenced. They share a common georeferencing system. So one point in one layer is going to be the same location. You can kind of drop that pin down through these, which means we can reassemble them all back together again and do some really complex spatial analysis. And so everything we do in GIS is made possible from this coincidence of spatial data. So we're talking about georeferenced data, and GIS are made powerful because these georeferenced data you can apply a range of spatial analysis techniques to them. And then the whole system is made beautiful, in my view, because you can do cartography and design and make beautiful products from your work. So those three things, data analysis and design, I want to quickly touch on. And mostly I want to touch on data because many of you are have some experience in GIS, but it's always good to have a wee review. So GIS data is typically thought of in these two sort of worlds, these two world views. One is vector and one is raster. And vector data is points, lines, and polygons, and raster data are grids. Vector data are location-based. Everything is made up of spatially explicit points. Those points can be connected via lines. Those lines can be connected to create polygons. And the spatial information for every single point and every single line and every polygon is all kind of contained with the vector data model. The raster example is organized into grids. These are grids. They can be organized in terms of bands, so layers of grids, but every grid cell just holds one piece of information. It's just, that's my elevation or that's my brightness value. And the spatial information, conversely, is implicit. It's just relative to each cell, is relative to its neighboring cell, and which means you can do a lot of analyses in raster really faster. So hence the expression raster is faster. But they're both useful, and we use them both. And there's one's not better than the other. They are, they serve their purpose for different roles. Vector data examples: points, lines, polygons, sample locations, trees, centroids, addresses, point clouds. These are all points. Lines, transportation, tiger line files, hydrology, contours, etc. Polygons like land use, land cover, census polygons, census tracts, census blocks, fire perimeters. All these things are stored in a vector environment. Raster data, and we're going to be using some similar ones today, Elevation is commonly stored as a raster data set. Remotely sensed data, imagery is commonly stored in raster. Land use, land cover, and downscale climate. So those are 4 kind of really typical raster data sets that you might encounter, but there are many more. So for those of you who have not worked in cloud GIS, you're very familiar with things like local geospatial data sets like shapefiles or geodatabases. Those are files that can be stored on your computer. If you want to share them with somebody, you can zip them up and send them. If you want to copy them, you can copy them. You have them, you have control of them on your computer. When we move to the cloud and we do GIS in the cloud, we have to think about our data formats a little bit differently. And so cloud data, when we're finding data in the cloud, sometimes people will just host, a local file, like here's a zipped up geodatabase in the cloud, have at it. But more commonly, we're talking about GIS data in cloud native format, which means readily consumable, what are called layers with services. And the layers are the data and the symbology attached to those data. And services are the instructions on how that data set can be used. So spatial data, native spatial data in the cloud are layers and services, and the services constrain how you can actually use these things. And we're going to be talking about feature layer, there's image layer, elevation layer, vector tile layer, and scene layer. All you need to know is when you are finding data in the cloud and you're going to do that, you're not really looking for a zipped up shape file as commonly as you might be, just pulling in a layer from a repository. And some of the most common cloud sources that we are going to talk about and use are the Esri ones, and they're fantastic. One is ArcGIS Online, which is sort of a smorgasbord, if you will, of wonderful data sets out there that have been published by people. And then if you want a more curated library of spatial data, you'll find that in the Living Atlas of the World. And Sean will be talking about both of these. But these are data that are stored up in the cloud that you, on your desktop, when you're using ArcGIS Pro on your desktop, you can be pulling these down and working with them. Sometimes you can't do everything you want with them because they've been defined with these, various services. Okay, so I'm just going to do a quick look at the chat here. Just good. We're in business. Okay.
Maggie, can I ask you a quick question?
Yes. Yes.
So how do you go from vector raster to layers and services? Those are kind of the 2 words. Yeah. What's the relationship?
It's an excellent question. So when you're dealing with local data, it's pretty clear, right? Vector data is like shapefile, raster data is grid. Nowadays, we can have them both in a geodatabase. When we're talking about the cloud and we're talking about vector data, we're talking about feature layers. That's the new term. Feature layers. That's vector data. All these other ones, image layer, elevation layer, and scene layer, those are raster layers. There's also a vector tile layer, and that's a kind of a base map. All these tile layers that Esri publishes are base maps so you can prettify your web app or web map. So your question, I think, was like, do they map one-to-one from local to the cloud, raster vector? They do.
Yep, got it. So thanks. So vectors and rasters are subsets of their types of layers. Services are a complete different type of beast on the cloud.
Services are attached to these layers, and they say the user can use it in this way, right? So you can publish a image layer, and you'll find this when you start hunting for data on Living Atlas. You'll pull in a lovely raster layer from Esri, and you'll find out you can actually use it. you can't, manipulate it. And that's because the services that come with that layer, that image layer, constrain it to be just a visual. Does that make sense? Do you want me
Perfect. Thank you.
Good. Okay, great. Yeah. So it's just different. In the desktop world, if you had a remotely sensed image, you could just zip it up and send it to your friend. They'd do whatever they want with it. But in the cloud world, it's hosted with some constraints. And sometimes those constraints are little and sometimes they're a lot. And sometimes you don't know, which I think we might find out in the workshop. Okay, so some more basics really quickly. Everything we do in GIS starts with data about the Earth, geospatial data. And because the Earth is a three-dimensional shape, and we are working in a two-dimensional world, we have to do something to get that three-dimensional shape onto a flat surface. And that's projections. And so the shorthand for projections are, we've got this super complex, lumpy, weird Earth. We can model that Earth as a geoid, and a geoid is just a 3D depiction of constant gravity, and it's not perfect, but we can model it. We can then model that geoid as a much cleaner ellipsoid. And then we can take that ellipsoid and straighten it out into a flat surface that has a coordinate system in X and Y. And the link between this ellipsoid and the geoid is what's called the datum. And the datum and that coordinate system gets pulled together into the projection. And all you need to know about this is there are many projections out there, and none of them are perfect. Some of them are better than others. Some of them have a more appropriate use than others. But whenever you're dealing with spatial data, you're thinking about what's my projection, and my projection is made up of my ellipsoid, my datum, and my coordinate system. And in California, you're going to encounter data that is going to come to you in many different projections. These are the 5 most common. The first is what we call geographic, and it's really not a projection per se, because it's just 1 degree of longitude equals 1 degree of latitude. And as we know, that's not really the shape of the Earth. The Earth isn't a perfect, isn't a perfect sphere. And even if it was a perfect sphere, it still wouldn't work. But you will get data in just decimal degrees, and it's not great to do your analysis in what's called geographic. So let's move on to these next projections. The first is California Teal Albers. And this is a projection that was designed for California. It has the whole of California in one projection. And so the California data stores distribute California data in California Teal. Another projection is UTM, Universal Transverse Mercator, and this is a worldwide coordinate system, and it splits the Earth up into strips from pole to pole of 6 degrees apart. So these are zones, and California happens to sit between 2 zones, Zone 10 and Zone 11. That's my favorite right there. That's the one I love. Then there's state plane. Every state has its own state plane projection system that was designed really for surveying. It's very accurate, but it also is not entirely transferable. Each state kind of has its own unique zones, and yeah, it's a great projection. So you're going to encounter data most likely when you're working in California, you're going to encounter data with California Teal Albers, UTM, or state plane. But as we increasingly work in the web world, in the cloud world, you're also encounter data that is Web Mercator. So all of the Esri base maps that we're going to be using, or that you're going to be looking at in Pro, they use Web Mercator, and it's great. You know, it's optimized for sort of global, these big tiles, but it's not great to do your analysis in, although there are schools of thought. Anything that has to do with area, because Mercator stretches stuff near the poles, you know, that's what Mercator does, is it stretches stuff. So it's not great if you're doing any kind of analysis that has to do with area, but a lot of people do work in Web Mercator and then reproject their work when they're done. I don't happen to think that's great, but schools of thought. All right, so this is what we're going to do. I want to just mention this because I want to talk about, these are some things we're going to do, and we've talked about data. I want to talk a little bit about analysis. Don't get frightened off by this next slide. It's just to show you this is what we're going to do. This is all the fun stuff you can do in GIS. There's so much fun stuff you can do. Some of it is just working with data. How do I collect it? How do I wrangle it? How do I evaluate quality? Some of it is vector-centric analysis, overlays, geocoding, geoenrichment, working with networks. Some of it is raster-based, all these remote sensing things, working with topology, working with hydrology, doing risk mapping, remote sensing, so much fun stuff. And then the cartography and design, again, is a real fundamental part of GIS. And we're going to close here by talking a little bit about that. So on your right is a terrible, accept all the defaults map of Lynn Cove that I made Sean make. It's just like, it's just slapped together. You know, it probably took him 5 minutes to do. And on the left is Kenneth Field. He's one of the Esri design heads. And if there's a lot of free workshops and where he leads, he's just great. And this is really where ArcGIS Pro shines. You can really dig into the analysis elements of your map and make them make your product useful and gorgeous. And as Ken Field always says, just go beyond the defaults. So we're going to look at this map here on the right, and then just some simple changes. Subtle, legible legend. You don't have to put the word legend. There's a good balance of space. The focus is on the content, not on the, you know, kind of other elements. Good clear font, same all throughout. Subtle north arrow, very nice inset map there. The imagery is used as a backdrop. So these are just some small changes you can do to make your map quite pleasing. So that's what we're going to do. All right, on to the workshop. So we probably won't be sending you any emails during the break. If you need any help, just reach out in the chat. I'm going to stop my screen now and turn it over to Sean.
All right, and I'm going to share my screen before I start talking and forget to do so, which I did last time. Anyway, so yes, I know that a couple of people trickled in here after we got started, so I'm going to repeat just a little bit of what I talked about before. But before I do so, just a little teeny bit of house cleaning or keeping. Based on comments from past workshops from our evaluations, which by the way, we'll send out an evaluation at the end, and we take those really seriously, and we really appreciate your feedback. We're always trying to make these workshops better, and your feedback helps with that for sure. But based on some of those comments, one of which is frequent, is to have some kind of orientation to how to set our windows up at the beginning, because we only have so much real estate on the screen and we have so many things to show you, and you have things to work on if you're following along with some hands-on steps, and that gets to be difficult. So what I have settled on, at least for myself, for my idea of what's best, is I like to have the workshop exercise to the left. Even if you are following along with what I'm describing, sometimes it's nice to have this here in case you need to copy and paste like a URL or a file name or something to that effect over into your, like say, creating a new file and what name that file should be. That kind of thing is helpful. So having the directions over to the side, and then on the other side of the screen, I tend to like to have my ArcGIS Pro session. For you all, you also have the Zoom window. I just have little pieces of my Zoom window in my way. And with that, I might recommend having that overlapping your your exercise directions to the left again. So I know there's a lot of screens to have on here at once, and it becomes difficult to toggle between one and the other when I'm explaining something or you're trying to read directions and also be able to do the exercise. But that seems to be at least the best that I've come up with. And I know many of us are really becoming experts on Zoom after COVID, but it's, this gets to be slightly complicated. Go back to what we were talking about before, for those of a couple of you that had showed up after I can see that there's 2 people that have joined us. What we did before we got started was to test your application. And if you have not done so already, let's everybody do this. Let's open our ArcGIS Pro. And in my case, I go down and go to my start window, or I have it docked on my bottom, but I'll do it so what it would be like for everybody else. Search for it there. It also shows the most recent one I've opened up, which was ArcGIS Pro, and open your ArcGIS Pro. Hopefully everybody has downloaded and was able to unzip the data for the workshop that was sent out earlier at 11:15. But if not, that should be in your email. By the way, I'm going over all this stuff now because I'm going to give another orientation to where all the buttons and levers are at in the software, or maybe not all, but a number of them. And during that time, you'll still have, you'll have the ability to get yourself further set up if you're not already there yet. We kind of like to have like a slow hands-on start. So these predictable glitches or holdups are worked out before we start getting our hands dirty with the software. Once the software is up, let's go up to the top and you will click on Map. And what this is doing is it's going to, you're going to have to select a location to put your project. And what I recommend is going to where you put your data in your C drive, in your ArcGIS Pro workshop folder, and just click on that, and that is going to be your project location. The name of the project, like we did earlier, ArcGIS Pro exercise. Now I've done 2 of them. I should probably put a 3 on the end of mine. If you've already done this, and by the way, you have this all up, you don't have to worry about it. You can just, or you could continue to follow along with what we're doing here, as long as we have ArcGIS Pro up when you're all done with this. And then we click OK. And it'll take a moment to set up. What it's doing right now is it's setting up a ARPX file, which is like a parent file that's going to be relating all of these layers, and what I refer to as layers is it becomes difficult parsing out some of these terms. Layers being, in this case, feature layers, points, lines, and polygons, or raster layers that will go into your table of contents. And it's going to relate all those into the project that you are going to be working on within ArcGIS Pro. It's also going to be setting up a geodatabase that you can create or manipulate data within for this project as you move along. So once you're up here, as we did earlier, I'm going to scoot it down a little bit so I can see around my Zoom windows that are covering part of the screen. What you'll do is we'll go over to the View tab. And because it's all scrunched up, I'm going to have to stretch it out to be able to see Catalog pane is going to be one of the options. I'll select that, and it'll pop up on your left side of your screen. Go to Portal, and then click on the second to last ArcGIS Online, and you see a number of layers here. Don't worry about if you can see them, we're good. Alternatively, you can look at the Living Atlas and click on that, and you'll see a number of layers as well. This is usually a good indicator to show that your software license is already enabled with the correct extensions or the ability to reach out to online data in the cloud. So you have essentially like an ArcGIS Online account associated with this. It's typically the way it is, but at every workshop, it seems like there's someone that doesn't have this ability, at least in the past.
So
Good.
Sean, when I click on portal, I only see training map.
Okay, there we go. So I knew there's always someone there. Let's see. Let's have you work with Shane or Robert. If Shane or Robert could have you go into a breakout room, and they will make sure that you're set up. They can get you set up with another login, and that'll be fully functional. And just out of curiosity, where are you located at? Where's your license from?
Davis.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Huh, interesting. I just kind of try to keep track, so I get kind of like a bead on where there's limitations in licenses. Okay, but yeah, if Shane or Robert could help you out, that would be fantastic. Thanks. So good. Time well spent that we went over this.
What? Who just spoke, Sean?
That was Steve Bocher.
Oh, Steve Bocher. Steve, I'll join you in room 1.
Great. So anyways, so yeah, moving on. So that when you bring up your ArcGIS Pro session, as I would call it, you're going to have a lot of limits on what you can see and do, because the way that ArcGIS Pro works is it has a contextual ribbon that runs across the top of the screen. So we have map, insert, analysis, so forth across the top. But if you don't already have data within your project, it's not going to be fully functional. These tabs again are contextual, so they only work with the data that you have available. And to get around this, so the next, let's see, I'll try to make it fast because I want to make sure that we don't get that we have enough time to get through everything that we want to do. I'm gonna spend the next 10 minutes or so just to go over the software and point out some of the things that are some of the levers and buttons that we'll be using for the exercise. This is now hands off, just so you know. You don't have to follow along. Now that you have it up and running, then we'll take a break. One of the things from speaking of the evaluations is a lot of people say we should take more breaks. So it's not like a fire hose on you of all the things about ArcGIS that and then we and so you can kind of decompress and then just absorb it at a good pace. So that said, I'll go through just what the software is, what we're going to be working toward, and then we'll take a break, and then we'll go on to bringing in your data for about the next half hour and visualizing it. Then we'll come back and we'll go through some data management, processing, and analysis tools for the next, I'll say, call that 45 minutes or so. And then at the end, I want to make sure that we have enough time to do a little bit of cartography to make to actually come up with something that looks neat. Speaking of that, and this is what we're going to be working towards, is the map that Maggie just showed here shortly ago. Something like this. This is what we're going to be doing. To get there, we're going to first come up with a primary map. We're going to be working towards creating something like this. To get to this, you also will need a call out map. So here is the call out I've created. And what we have across the year, and this is, I'm going to kind of cover what is viewed across these tabs here before we jump up to the contextual ribbon. This right here is a map view. If you're used to ArcGIS, the traditional ArcGIS desktop, this would be what would be the map view. Now you can have multiple views and layouts all across here. So you have multiple options instead of just two. Like the traditional app. The next one, again, this is another map. These are used to create what's called a layout. This is a fairly nice version of a map. Shane and I worked on this at one point, thought this was a good kind of representation of the data. The idea of a good map is to be able to convey the point that you want to convey as clearly as possible. And to do that, you need to have things pop out that are important, and you want to have things in an order and using your space correctly. So the most important things are what you're going to be looking at, as opposed to, say, a legend that's huge or out of place, or a title or the title legend. And what would be another example? It'd be a bad layout, is what Maggie showed. And she said that I probably threw this together in a few minutes. And honestly, after doing this for tons and tons of years, it was harder to come up with a bad layout than to come up with a good layout, because my mind just rejected the idea of doing it. It was like, okay, what could I do wrong here? Why is the north arrow so dang important? Why is the color scheme just is painful? Well, nothing seems to be really that in the hierarchy of what's important. It just isn't there. It's not, barely legible. So that's just like a terrible case example. But and then that also requires its own map layer. So these would be 2 map layers to build this layout layer. Layout view. I even trip over the terminology here too. Speaking of terminology, if I say something, or and something I say is not kind of confusing, or I'm using terms that you're not used to, that's totally understandable. None of us are born with the knowledge of GIS and all of the acronyms and so forth that go along with it. And so if I lose you anywhere, please throw it in the chat. We have fantastic help here that can help out with that, or they can moderate it to me in comments at certain points. And then we'll also have breaks that you can then jump on there and then ask me yourself, because we don't have like 50 people in this workshop this time around. So there'll be time and for everybody to ask their questions at the breaks too. So anyways, moving on. So again, map tab, layout tab right here across to create these different views. Now, speaking of the contextual ribbon and the content. So I'm going to go across left to right, project. You know, have something similar to what we saw when we initially opened up with the map and the catalog and then so forth. But across the left, you'll have all these options. I don't usually use most of these, but I have highlighted the licensing sometimes, because this will show what licenses we have. And this is what will limit some users from being able to do, say, your spatial analysis, geoprocessing tools that you'll need for some steps in the exercise. Most of these are usually activated for people, but not necessarily. And so the licensing and so forth in here. There's well, we don't need to dive into too much of this stuff, but there's also the save and save as, which are important, or new or open. So that's under project tab. You're usually not there, but where you usually do work out of is the map tab. So in map, I'm going to stretch this over so we get a full view for everybody. The map tab is where you'll see your content in what we refer to as a pane. So on the left side, which is the default, I have my contents pane. I noticed on my other computer after an update, the contents pane was not automatically popping up when I brought up the exercise. And so to do that, I'm going to skip out and then come back to the map pane. I would go to view and then the contents. And this is what would bring up the contents pane into the map if it was closed out. Back to map tab. Another very important thing to know about is your explore button. The reason why I say it's very important to know about this is because sometimes we'll be using some of these other tools. And an example would be like the select tool. And if I was trying to select something, and then after that, I was like, oh no, I can't move my map around. I can't do what I want to do. To escape from the selection tool, I could just click on explore again, and then I could move my map around, zoom, and so forth. It's that explore tool is very handy. It also allows you to click on the map and get the information about the layer where you click, either be it raster or vector. Since I click to select, I want to clear my selection. I don't need that selected. So if, and we'll repeat this if you need to too, the Explore tool is very useful for escaping other tools that will limit your ability to navigate around your map. One thing nice about ArcGIS Pro, well, and this has been the case for ArcMap 2 before it, is if you hover over things, you'll see some tips and pointers that will explain what you can do with that given option. I highly recommend, this is a point where I should mention, if you have a mouse or a trackball handy, this is really, really helpful for this workshop. And pretty much anytime you're working with a GIS type software application, having a mouse or a trackball is really important, because if you can't just use the roller to be able to zoom in and out or click and drag with the mouse, that's going to be difficult if you're trying to do that on, say, your touchpad on your computer. It's just not nearly as easy. So you might want to, if you don't have one handy, you're on a laptop, try to grab one maybe during the break. Other options, these are the navigation tools. So I can jump out to the previous extent or go back. So say I went like this and I wanted to go back to where I just was, I can click backwards. I can go out to the full extent of this given scene. I can go to a coordinate, which I don't usually have to do. I can change the base map in the background. We'll come back to that in the exercise. We can add data. We'll show you how to do that, as well as another way that I prefer. I showed you the selection tool where you can select options, and we'll come back to that in the exercise as well. And then there's some other measurement tools and so forth along to the right. But we'll work on this a lot within the map tab. Now moving down to the contents, something to note about the contents is that the best way conventionally, what I recommend is having your smaller layers or the layers that you're actively working on at the top of your contents. And the reason for this is what's on top under the drawing order, under contents, is what will appear at the highest level on your map here. So if I drug this layer underneath, somewhere underneath, say one of the, I don't know, I'd have to go, there's nothing really open below that. But if I put a different layer on top of that, then the other layer would appear over it in your map. Typically, we'll be working in contents in the drawing order, but you also will have options of listing by source, which shows the location of the given layers that are included in your contents, and then list by selection. You can list by editing which things are able to be edited right now, and then the rest of these I don't usually use, so we'll skip it. One thing you can do is you can grab these, and we'll do this in the exercise, and drag and drop them to different locations, and I'll find an example. So let's grab, I'm going to grab my DSM. I'm going to drag that all the way up to the top, put it over the top of this, and then turn it on. Oh, I missed it. I clicked off of it. Where did I do with that? What happened? Oh, I grabbed the wrong layer. What in the world happened there? Oh, there it is. I just wasn't able to scroll up. So see, now this is active. I turned it on by clicking the radio box over the top of it, and now it covered up the other layer because it's on top of it over here. I don't actually need this here, so I'll just drop it back down where I found it, and I put it inside of a subcategory or a layer group that I created for this project. We'll go over that shortly too in the data management. So anyways, that's you'll get to explore that on your own. Moving on really quick, because I want to wrap up this section, we can get a break. You also have the insert tab. This is where we can add a new map like we've done here to create the call at, or we can add a new layout, which is what we did to create the layout here. You'll notice that this is also contextual. If I'm in a map tab and I click to a layout tab, the contents change. This just, on the contents, it shows what is visible on the actual map by checking on and off these different options. we can we'll circle back to that as well. There's that really comes up largely when you're adding in map elements, not to be confused with map features. Map features or raster layers, those are the spatial elements that you're putting, or spatial components that you're putting into your map. Map elements are things like your north arrow, your neat lines, your other your titles and so forth. Those show up in the contents for the layout, because that's what's most important for a layout view, is these map elements, wherein if you're in a map view as opposed to a layout view, then you have the ability to adjust symbology and other things more. Is this all of this? I know it will be confusing for a little bit, but eventually it becomes more and more clear. So anyways, the insert tab, that's important here. The other thing is adding a folder connection, which will be one of the very first things that we do when we get into hands-on stuff to make your life easier. And the rest of this stuff I'll skip for now because it's not too critical that we learn this today. Analysis, I'm just going to very briefly touch on this because this is where you'll go to your geoprocessing tools, and the lovely search function is great. Just so you know, if you're ever trying to figure out how to do something in ArcGIS, I've learned long ago that geospatial nerds like myself like to put their content online, and so a good Google search will find for how to say clip a raster will usually lead you to the search terms that you need to put in here for, say, clip raster, or and you could find your tools this way. The search functionality here is really, really good with a little bit of help from some Google searches, as well as looking at the toolboxes, which there are aplenty, and this is much more cumbersome to try to find what processing step you want to find than going by search. So this is really under analysis, the tools is key. View, I already showed you this briefly, but this is what you'll be using your catalog pane today, your catalog view today. You accidentally close out your contents, you can click on contents to view your contents again. This is another way you can also get to your geoprocess toolbox that we have that pops up in the pane to the right. Edit. There's an optional section in the exercise functionality for, but we won't do it today just because I want to leave enough time for the cartography section. And I just know from past experience, we just don't have time to edit features, but I will kind of touch on what it means right now. If I go on the edit tab and I click on navel oranges, this allows me to create new features. If I would like to, I could click on, say, this, click on this layer over here.
Oh, there's Sean.
There we go. I just had a little glitch where my internet just blinked off for a minute. I had to reload my Zoom. Okay. Well, the timing could have been a lot worse because I'm virtually done with what I was just showing. And so where was I at? Edit. I was just saying this is where you can edit, change, and modify or add features. Imagery, we'll come back to this later, specifically for raster functions. And then
Sean, you're not sharing.
Oh, I'm sorry, my sharing. Yeah, blink. Yeah, okay, hold on. I got to get my Zoom window to the point where I can share my screen again. There we go. Aha. There, you see that now?
Yes.
Okay, great. So all I said was, yeah, after the edit, where you can create and modify features in the directions or in the exercise, you can use that. And then also the imagery tab, and specifically, we will use the raster functions at one point that would show up over on the side where we can use these other tools for manipulating your rasters. So that was all I was going to cover for right now for the orientation. And so let's take a 5-minute break. Actually, let's make it like a 6 or 7 minute break till just a little bit before quarter after the hour. And we will, then we'll jump into adding data, and then we'll go for about a half hour or so and then take another short break. Sound good? And if anybody has any questions, yeah, speak up. I'll hang out for a moment, and then we'll, and then we can all take a breather, and then we'll come back and continue. Thank you. All right. So moving on, one last thing that's it's not really too much of a too much explanation, and then the rest of it is going to be hands-on. It's just a little teeny orientation to the directions. If you decide to use this now or at a later time, we put a lot of information in the directions. I'm going to be off script a lot of the time when it comes to going through these steps for the sake of time. The way that we put these together often is we try to convey everything we wish that we knew when we first started doing ArcGIS. But the problem is that would require like a 5 or 6 or 10 hour workshop to get through everything. And we only have 2.5 hours to do so. So we can't cover everything, but I still want to make sure that you have those resources available to you. And so if you scroll down through here, you'll come to sections that say optional. I'm not getting to one yet, but there will be, here's one, optional. So this adding online data, this would be an optional section. We're going to cover this one today, but then I read out some of the ones in my directions, like this one, that for steps that are not necessarily relevant for coming to the final product of the workshop right now. But there's a lot of things in here, like spatial analysis, or some of the analysis tools, the querying and so forth that are available in here, spatial subsetting and zonal statistics, those kinds of things that are available. So just know that there's a ton of stuff in here. This is also numbered. So you have like, say, 3.1. The purpose of that is if you are working through the exercise and you have an issue with something today, or even on an office hours on a later time, you can say, I'm having trouble on this step, and then we can get oriented quickly to figure out how to help. So with that said, I mentioned this at the beginning of the break. One of the things that about an ArcGIS project is, or in a map specifically, is that the first layer that you put in will dictate the projection. Maggie touched on projections earlier, but this is an important thing. It's not super important for the visualization of the data that we're going to do today, but it is very important in some analytical steps. Some steps will give you either poor results or break if you have mixed matched projections with your data and you're trying to do kind of cross-layer analyses. And so having knowing a little bit about your projections is important. Another thing is the little orientation to the data that we'll be using today. We have what we call metadata, and metadata is either information or data about the data. And we'll be looking at, as Maggie mentioned earlier, the Lynn Cove Research and Extension Center that is focused largely on citrus cultivation down the southern Central Valley, or the San Joaquin Valley rather. And this includes tree data that's online for the research center, as well as pack line data. I mention this because I try to create this exercise to emulate a real project, even though this wasn't really like a published project, for example, but to show how you can practically use GIS along with ancillary field data. The way that is that we have these shape files, or vector point files in the case of trees, that we can match up with pack line data. And pack line data in this case is that we have the sophisticated monitoring, what do we call it, like analysis system, processing system for the cultivation at the research center, wherein each of a set of trees is set up with RFID tags, and what's cultivated from each of these trees is bundled together and run through a pack line system that then assesses the coloration, the size, the weight, and so forth of all of the data that's all of the fruit that are coming off of the trees. And because we have those RFID numbers that are associated with spatially explicit trees, then we can reconnect that data that is done through this processing system back to the spatial imagery, in this case of the positions from where that data came from, or that fruit came from. So, and that involves joining that tabular data, the packline data, with the shape files of the trees. All right, so that, like I said, that was just a little orientation to what we have here and the directions. And with that, we have already set up a new map. We'll go off script a little bit. I already talked about the contents pane and terminology about that. And next, I am going to switch over the project, and this is where you can start following with hands-on. So the first thing that we'll want to do once we have our project set up like this, I'm trying to get this thing to stretch out all the way so it's as big as possible for you to all see. We are going to want to add a link to our data so it's easier to get to right away. And the way that we do that is we go over to the Insert tab at the top and we click Add Folder. So if you follow that, if you're on your project, from Map, go to Insert and click Add Folder. And this is basically just creating a shortcut to the data that you want to use. So I'm going to click on this PC, go to the C drive, double click in this case, and then go to the ArcGIS Pro workshop folder. I'm going to actually go one layer because I have so much in here. Actually, no, I'll just leave it in that. So the ArcGIS Pro workshop folder is good enough. And I'll click OK. That's going to be really quick. That's going to become apparent why we did that. I'm going to close that because you might not have that open yet. The next thing that we will want to do is to add some data into the project. And the way to do that, we can, if we go back to the Map tab at the top, we click Add Data. And if we go to Folders, what you'll see is your ArcGIS. I'm going to stretch this out so you can see, hopefully. Your ArcGIS Pro workshop that you just added a link to now is shortcutted at the top and you can get to it easily. Otherwise, it's kind of buried down in your system sometimes and it's not easy to find and takes wastes a lot of time. So now that we've shortcut it, we can always get to it so we can go add data easily like this. So we go to our ArcGIS Pro workshop folder and we're going to go down down to where it says Mosaic. And inside of that Mosaic folder, you'll see the 64 West W Drone MS Mosaic folder. And MS is short for multispectral. Maggie mentioned this comes from a drone, and that drone was equipped with a red edge multispectral camera that collects imagery in blue, green, red, the red edge, and near infrared parts of the spectrum. And so having more than the red, green, and blue makes it multispectral. So I'm going to click on this here. And for some reason, it's saying add. I'll double click this. What the heck? Why am I not? Oh. I'll just click on it over here. I'm sorry. See, what I did is I clicked here. I tried to click too deep. And it shows if I click on it too much, it shows all the bands inside. So this would be blue, green, red, red edge, and near infrared. I don't want to load those individually in, which I could do. I want to load all of them at once. So I'm going to click on it, click on the mosaic here, and then the name over here and click OK. You know, it's important that we load this layer in first because this is going to dictate the projection of the project. And by default, drone imagery comes in. It's called UTM, or Universal Transverse Mercator, within that projection system. Specifically in this case, I think we're at zone 11 because Lynn Cove is east of, what is it, 122 degrees longitude. I believe it's the longitude angle that goes north-south with the here, I'll zoom out and you can see what I'm talking about. Lake Tahoe, you know, where the state splits, this line, the north-south line here is the split between zone 10 on the left and zone 11 on the right. I zoomed out, and just in case you did the same thing using the roller ball, this is a good time to practice one of the really handy tools. You can go up to your navigate tool and click back here, previous extent, or you can right click on this file and go to zoom to layer. So right click, zoom to layer if you happen to zoom out. Good. So now we have this field 64 of the Lynn Cove Center in our project. Before we dive into any of the symbology or stylizing this layer, I want to dump a whole bunch of layers in here at once. A large part of successfully putting maps together is keeping track of and organizing your data once it gets into a project. And so I'm going to make it harder, make it slightly challenging to start with by putting a whole bunch of data into our project and then working with organizing it from there. So I'm going to show you the second way and my preferred way of adding data to a project. And that is, I'm going to go up to the tabs, over to View. So on the top, the fifth one over, and click View, and then select Catalog Pane. Over here, it defaulted to where I was last at, but I want to go to the first one of these if it's not already there. Oops, Project, I'm sorry, Project. The first tab was Project, not Portal. And then we are going to go down to Folders. Again, you have the shortcut. We'll expand the ArcGIS Pro Workshop folder. And within that, we have a whole bunch of different folders for data, including your boundary, DSM, which is digital surface model. Maggie touched on that. That's the top of canopy elevation model. So the elevation of the area up to the top of the trees, as opposed to the digital terrain model, the DTM, which is the elevation subtracting everything that's in theory above the ground. I say in theory because it's not always that perfect, but it's again, in theory, kind of a model level of just ground level subtracting things like trees in elevation. Then we already added the mosaic in there. NDVI, that's short for Normalized Difference Vegetation Index. This is a relative health value of, or relative vigor value for plants. Pack line data, we won't worry about this one yet because it's tabular data and not actual spatial data yet. Then we have projects, and these are the Lynn Cove project site map, and then trees, and we'll skip trees to start with. So what we'll do is we'll go open up boundary. You can right click it and add to map, but add to current map. But what I prefer to do is just grab it, pull it over. You can either just drop it on the map or you can drop it in the order over here, but I'll just drop it on the map here. Don't worry, everything's going to turn purple or it's not going to be what you want to see. That's what I was getting at before about part of the battle is just being able to organize your data, and we'll do that after we add the data in. The digital surface model, the DSM, go ahead and ignore the backup LREC drone DSM folder for now. That was there because one of the previous versions of ArcGIS Pro had a glitch that sometimes would corrupt the file, these other ones that we were going to use. And I wanted to have a backup for people. I like to have redundancy in case things go wrong. So with this, we'll add in the 64 West DSM, just drag and drop it over, and the LREC drone DSM as well. Drag and drop. So I'm just clicking, left clicking, and then dragging it on. And you see it just adds to the content to the left. The DTM, you can grab that, click it, drag and drop. We've already added the mosaic, so we'll skip that. We'll go down to NDVI, grab, drag and drop. Skip the pack line because if we inside there, you'll see it's a .csv file, and we don't need tabular data quite yet. We'll go into projects and we'll add in the 64 West field and the LREC projects. And there'll be two different layers we have in there. And then finally, we'll skip the trees. And the reason for that is we're going to pull this off from online, because that'll make this a little bit more interesting. The reason I have this again is for redundancy in case there's any issues with people's licensing and their access to the internet. And so just in case I have it there, but we'll be pulling that information from our ArcGIS Online account. Good. Now, if you have a trackball or mouse, just use your roller to roll back and you get to see what we have here. So we have a whole bunch of layers that are stacked right on top of each other. I mentioned before that it's kind of a convention to have the smallest or the active layers that you're working on at the top, but then there's and there's exceptions to that, but that's generally the rule of thumb. So let's just move a couple of these around for now. So we're going to grab the 64 West field, drag it and put it on top, and look, we now have it highlighted here. So the coloration difference that kind of shows how that it popped up to the top. Practice with turning off some of these to see what's below. And what we see there is there's this small raster, and that would be the 64 West, probably NDVI that's showing up. So we might drag that up somewhere higher up. So if we turned on this other layer, it pops up a little bit more. I'm going to drag it back down now because I have another idea that we're going to shift to in just a moment. You can just kind of experiment with looking at what layers toggling on and off. You can zoom in to see what the difference are. So you can see that the DTM, digital terrain model, it doesn't show a lot of topography. In my case, if you're looking at my screen, but if I drag the digital surface model up, it gives you a little bit more, or the site digital surface model will show it even accented a little bit more yet. But there's but let's continue with one couple more additions of data and then take a quick break, and then we'll get back.
Can I ask you just a quick
Yes, sir.
clarification question? So just to link back to what Maggie taught us.
Yes.
So you dragged SHP and TIF extension files. Do those correspond specifically to vector versus raster data?
Yes.
Or
So yeah, so see how this here 64 West DSM has TIFF afterwards. A TIFF file is a raster format. If I were to go up to the boundary file, and this, everyone can just watch this. This is just for explanation purposes. If I right click on that and look at the properties of it, and then I go to the source, and if I go all the way to the end of the source, you'll see .shp. I just know that that's a vector file, and even for more, confirming that it's also polygon. You don't have a raster polygon. There's two different things. So yeah, so that each of these that I'm dragging over, and you also see it over in the catalog where it says SHP or CSV. It's denoting what kind of data it is that you're pulling over.
Thank you.
Does that answer your question?
Yep.
Okay, good, good. Good, so let's add two more real quick, add two more types of data, and then we'll take a short break, and then we'll get on to some visualization, and then after that, some data management processing and so forth. So with the other types of data, the other means of adding data are going to be coming from online sources. If you still have your catalog pane open here, I want to, we're just going to ignore that now, and we're going to switch to a different way of getting to the catalog data. We'll go back to view, if it's not already active like it is on mine. You'll see catalog pane, but then we have catalog view available as well. So we'll click on catalog view. And here you will see a different way, maybe a little more descriptive way of looking at the data that's available via the catalog. And instead of having, like on the catalog pane, which is in my case still active on the right, you'll see portal favorites. That information is now available down the left side of your screen in the catalog view. So you see how we added a tab inside of your project here, where you have a map tab and now we have a catalog tab. So in catalog tab, now we are going to go down to Living Atlas is this last one here, and we'll click on that. Good. And then we'll go up and click on the search Living Atlas, and I'm going to type in NAIP, N-A-I-P, and click enter. NAIP is the National Agriculture Imagery Program from the USDA, and this is collected usually every 3 years at about 66 centimeters of resolution for the whole country through the months of June through August typically. And it's a really good good reference layer and good aerial imagery resource. I particularly like color infrared imagery when it comes to vegetation. So what I would recommend is going down to the fourth one down is the USA NAIP imagery color infrared. Right click on that and click add to map. You won't see anything change here other than you getting this little add data tab come up. But if I go up to the tab up here now, so everyone, if you missed that, I'm in the catalog pane. I added that from view. I go down, clicked on Living Atlas on the left side, search for NAIP, and then here I right-clicked the NAIP color infrared and added it to the map. Now, if I click on map at the top, you'll see that I have a USA NAIP imagery color infrared layer. I'm going to zoom out a little bit using my rollerball, and then you see that that covers up. I like color infrared because it really accents the contrast between vegetation and its surroundings. Because the near infrared part of the spectrum is very reflective when it comes to vegetation, unlike a lot of other types of surfaces. Good, so I brought this in just as an example for now. We might not even come back and use this, even though the directions do have a step included on how to clip this for a reference layer. And you can also export it using a workaround that we've found. Actually, Shane brought to my attention just yesterday, a new way of doing it where you can actually analyze this data. But for now, let's just click and turn this off. We don't need it for now. One more layer that we can add in there though is the tree data. We have the tree data in our content, but I want to add it from our catalog pane from the portal instead, because this is a way that you often end up getting data. It's neat nowadays, you have thousands of layers that are available to you online. So if I go over to the catalog pane now, forget about the catalog tab at the top, just go to the catalog pane and click on portal. The second to the last option in the cloud, go to ArcGIS Online. And then we'll type in L REC LREC _ trees and click enter. And the first option, we can right click and add to current map. Good. Now we have a cluster of trees over our area. There's the reason I prefer to bring it in here because I want to show you as a learning opportunity how to extract data from an online source to your own kind of repository of content. Good. Now that we have this is a very important step. We just added data, save your project. ArcGIS Pro now saves in the background, which is fantastic. Kind of like the automated save of, say, Microsoft Word. Didn't always do that, but every time you do a add data or before or after you do an analysis, it's a really good idea to save your project. And the way to do that is go up to the top left-hand corner and click save. Alternatively, you can go to project and save here as well. But yeah, so save your project. Good. Now, let's do this. Let's take a 6-minute break or so, and then we'll come back, do a little bit of visualization and some basic analysis before we shift gears onto some cartography. Sound good? Anyone have any questions? All right. So let's pop back in here at, say, 250. All right, let's get going again. All right, so here's something that's like, it's not that big of a strange thing, but it's interesting. ArcGIS Pro has every time they come out with a new version, there's little things that happen. I ran into a glitch earlier that now froze my ArcGIS Pro up on a certain step during the exercise that I ran into. I think it had to do with the .NET runtime that also has to be updated with the new software, but that's getting into the weeds. But each time a new update comes, certain things get better. Once in a while, things get not better. And some things is just, I don't know why they happen. And one of those is now when I brought in the LREC trees, it automatically puts them within a layer group. I don't know why it needs a layer group there. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to grab my LREC trees and drag them outside of that layer group. And then I'll right click on the other one and I'm going to remove it. So I don't really need a layer group just for the trees. It's only one layer. Kind of funny. That's just with this new update. But so now we have all of our layers here in the site. Really quick, I'm just going to show you a quick way to organize your data. And this is one of them. We can left click, press Control, and then click on the other polygon layers. So the ones that are squares. You can look down, see if there's any more, and there aren't. And then right click, and you can go to add to group. Where's it at? Group. Oh, it's just group at the top, third one down. And what it did is it created a new layer group, and I will just click on that once. And then I can type in polygons. And then enter. Now what I can do is I can reduce those, or I can turn them on and off all at once. So all the polygon layers can be turned on all at once. And so I can reduce them down to just unclutter all of this stuff we're looking at here. The nape isn't really all that important. It's more of like a base layer in the case of this project. So I'm going to drag it down near the bottom, put it here. So we can look at the data that we want to see, that we're going to be working with. Now let's click on the NDVI, press Control, DSM, DSM, DTM, And let's do the mosaic 2, I guess. Well, no, let's just do it those ones. This is a little off the directions, but we'll right click, group, and we can just click it once and call it rasters. Enter. Now I can reduce that down. I left the mosaic outside of it just because I'm going to be using that in a little bit. So I don't want to, it'd be easier just to have it outside for now. Then we can grab this and drag it up a little bit. So then we have that tree layer that is at just a little bit higher level. It's also buried underneath the trees right now, so we don't really see it much. Good. So now we have all the layers in here. They're sort of organized. So if you haven't done it already, so having the LREC trees at the top's handy. Having the mosaic below it is nice, just because we're going to be working with that mosaic specifically. Have your polygons that are available. I can click on some of those if I want to see that all that area, the boundaries handy. And then we have our rasters below that, which we don't need to worry about right now. Good. Let's play with a little bit of style and symbology. So I'm going to turn off the LREC trees for now. I'm going to right click on this layer here, the drone MS mosaic, right click. Oops. I clicked off and back on because I started going to edit it. And then I'm going to go down to zoom to layer. So now we can look at this here. So now we're jumping into a little bit of the contextual ribbon. I said that what the next steps were going to be visualization and a little bit of, and then before we do some further processing and analysis and management. This is the visualization part. And one of the things about visualization is that the rasters are visualized in a different way than vectors are. Right now, this is showing red is band 1, green is band 2, and blue is band 3. This looks fairly correct, but I happen to know that the band order that this is set up in is actually band 3 is red and band 1 is blue. There's also a band 4 and 5 for the red edge and the near infrared. And I like to look at my imagery in color, false color infrared. So what I'm going to do with this highlighted already, it's important that see, if I click on this, I'm going to get different contextual options at the top. Specifically, by clicking on having this highlighted, you'll see raster layer at the top. If you're working with the last version of ArcGIS Pro, it'll say appearance at the top, but it says raster layer now as of about a month or two ago. But what we'll do is we'll click on raster layer, and then we'll go over to band combination, click on this, and then we'll go down to custom. And what we can do is we can create a custom organization for the way that our imagery is displayed. So what I want to do is use band 3 is going to be band 5, or red is going to be band 5. Green is going to be band 3, because band 3 is actually the red color of the spectrum. And blue is going to be band 2, which is the green part of the spectrum. And what I'm going to call this is 532 underscore CIR for color infrared, and click add. And what you see then is that the brighter the red appearance, the healthier the trees are. A fun way to look at vegetation and imagery. Good. It's nice to make vegetation pop out, because remember I mentioned earlier, having the parts of the map that are most important stand out the most is oftentimes what you want to do, or usually what you want to do. And having color infrared, in my case, it makes it really stand out, as opposed to having like the green kind of similar to the wetted dirt around them in this case. Good. So now we have a good false color infrared view of this field. We could go into changing the symbology of some of the polygons and so forth, but for right now, let's just do one of them, and that will be the field. I'll turn off the raster layer, unclicking the box. And in this case, I am going to right click, or I'll just double click on the feature here, and you'll see symbology pop up to the left, or to the right, my bad. Alternatively, I can click off of this and you'll see symbology will change back to a raster format, because contextually the raster is what has different options for symbology to the right. Again, I'll go back to the polygon. You'll see the symbology to the right of the screen will appear. If that isn't in appearance there, and I'm going to close some of these. If I'm highlighting this and I click feature layer and click symbology, that same pane will pop up. We have the symbol here, and I'm going to click on the symbol. So you see over here, you can click on the symbol and it comes up. If you are in the other stage, you can just click on the symbol here as well, and it'll pop up with the various options that you have available to you. In this, let's click on, say, the dark bold outline. Will give you a dark hollow inside, but I'm going to want to use this later in a call out. So just to expedite that whole process, save ourselves time later on in the final cartography part. I'm going to go to properties. So at the top of the symbology pane, you'll see properties. I'll click on that. And then I will change the color to something like red, because I'm going to really want to have this highlighted later on. Good. I'm going to move my zoom a little bit and click apply. Now that's going to show where that field is. And we can turn that off on the polygons. I just demonstrated that, or had to go through that right now, just so you have an idea of how to adjust the symbology of a polygon versus the raster. The directions have a little more detail, and you can always play with this to really improve upon what you have there. Now, so that's just a little bit of the visualization part. We will come back to that later on, because sometimes, and this is just a little kind of pro tip, if you get too much into your symbology early on, or your style early on, you end up having to redo it later, because contrast between one color of one layer to another color of another layer, there's gonna you're gonna have to make changes again and again later on. So it's better to start to get everything in place what you want, and then start working on on your symbology. And one way that to highlight that is if I turn on my LREC trees and my drone MS mosaic layer, you can see those little dots don't really pop out too much over the top of those trees. They're just that little orange dot's a little too close to the red. So that'd be an example. That means that symbol, if we would have changed the symbology of that tree too early, and then it would be we'd have to change it again. But I just wanted to show you where some of those visualization tools were at. But I'm going to double check the directions. I want to make sure I'm not missing anything that's critical. I don't think we've added data. 5, added the online data. We navigated around. Good. I'm going to skip the raster clip. That was an optional section. Oh, next, I knew there was something. I want to visualize the elevation model for the entire research center. Good. And then accent it with the boundary. And that's before our data analysis. Good. So I'm going to zoom out just a little bit. So there's 2 steps that I want to do right here. Actually, there's going to be 3 steps that we'll do, and then before we take the next break and really get into the cartography part. The first step is I want to turn off, well, not is getting ready for the next step. Turn off the trees for now. And I want to really make this elevation, this digital surface model, look neat. And so what we'll do is we'll collapse these polygons down and turn off the polygon for now. We can leave this on, it's small, but we can turn it off as well if we want. We expand the rasters, turn off the DSM. And then we only want to have the LREC drone DSM available. So hopefully your map looks like this. So if you scroll down through here, everything is unchecked except for the LREC drone DSM. Even uncheck the DTM. That's for an analytical step in one of the optional sections. Good. So just that one is checked. Good. Now we are going to go up to feature layer. Oops, I should highlight it first. I forgot my whole conditional thing. I got to click on this. And then so I clicked on the raster layer, not feature layer. Good. Oh, I'm forgetting something. Imagery, my bad. Imagery, and then raster functions. Sorry, I was thinking raster layer, but imagery, raster functions. So across the top, you have your various tabs. Imagery is the one we're looking for. And under that, you have raster functions, and we'll click on that. And so this is going to be another set of, they're kind of like the geoprocessing tools, but instead of creating kind of permanent files, they're doing is creating temporary files in memory that you can use for visualization in your project. And here I want to type in hillshade, all one word, hillshade. And what we'll do is we'll click on hillshade. The raster that we want will be the LREC drone DSM. So should be on when you've got them to imagery, raster function, search for hillshade, raster drone DSM. The hillshade type, I kind of prefer the multi-directional a little bit, and then leave the rest of everything as the default. And then all we have to do is go down to create new layer, and you'll have this pop up on your screen. So we got kind of a neat looking backdrop that we can use. Thing though is that backdrop's got that weird boxy area around it that we don't really want. It just doesn't look good. So what I recommend doing is go back to map on the top. You can, after you admire this kind of cool layer that we just added to the map, go to the map tab, second from the top left corner. Then we're going to go to explore and click on the outside of this hillshade. And what I mentioned earlier, the explore tool for escaping other functions, but also it has the functionality of telling you what the value of this raster is at that given point. So it shows 228. A raster has different values for each of the pixels. So if I clicked on it somewhere else, you'll see 165, see 217, 229. So you have different values throughout this whole raster. Well, as it so happens in the hillshade, 228 it denotes the area that's outside of the actual hillshade. So now just remember that 228 number. What I'm going to do is go to my hillshade layer that I created. So you might have to use your roller to get up to the top of your drawing order on your contents. Give me a second to do that. And then click on this so it's highlighted. Go up to raster layer at the top of the screen. So we have hillshade, raster layer, and symbology. And if you go down and click on mask, so you see the symbology turns up on the right. If you go down to the sort of the bottom section and the second tab over, there's this mask option right here. You click on the box area and then add in the value 228 and enter. And what it did is it got rid of all of that area on the outside. Let's do the same thing for the actual digital surface model for the entire rec. So we'll go down and click on that now. So if you see where when I know you got toggling between multiple screens, if you're following along, if you scroll down to LREC drone DSM, and as soon as you highlight it, the symbology tab pane over to the right will change to reflect that layer instead. Let's change the color scheme first with the drop down. And you scroll down most of the way. Where's it at? Did I pass it up? There's one that I really like. It's called elevation 1. There it is. Elevation number 1. So it's this kind of, it doesn't matter which one of these you pick, but just for the fun of it, this is a good one. It's like, you can see it where this is toggled at about a little quarter to an eighth of a quarter of the way down, and click on that. Oh, and you can't see it because it's buried underneath the layer above. I grab this and drag it down a little bit. Turn off your hillshade. Turn off the hillshade. And then you'll see that the colors have changed. Good, so you have this colorized layer here, but if you turn on the hillshade, it's covering it up. Back to the drone, the LREG drone DSM, click on that again, and you'll see the symbology pop back up. I know this is kind of confusing, maybe toggling back and forth between layers, but I mean, that's you'll end up doing this so much that you'll just get really used to it when you're getting into the readiness for cartography, like the really kind of neat cartographic effects. So you'll have to toggle from one thing to the next thing to the other thing and back and forth. It's just the way it's set up. So now we have the symbology here. Let's do a mask as well for that one. So I'm going to click outside the area, and the DSM shows that the outside area is 0. So the 0 value outside. So if you didn't click outside of it, you don't need to worry about it. I know it's 0. We'll go down to mask, click display, background is 0. And look, now you have this area outside is completely, yeah, it's transparent now. You don't have, it's not blocking out the view of the map. It gives you a much clearer effect. Good. We've done those steps. Let's click save at the top. Anytime you do something kind of significant like that, it's good to save your project. So save at the top left-hand corner. And I save that because I usually recommend doing this before or after you do an sort of an analysis or significant process. And what we're going to do, so we're going to turn on the hill shade again. Make sure it's highlighted. Go up, click on raster. If it's not already clicked, oh, I got to make sure my hill shade is highlighted. Raster. Go over to layer blend. Click the drop down and go down to darkness modes multiply and click that. And look what we got. Really neat layer. A really nice looking effect. Good. So we have yeah, so we can use that as our background for our project if we so wish. You're gonna we'll have time, I think, so you can play around with this a little bit, and so you can toggle on and off these various background layers for your project, your project final result. And then we can save it again if we so wish. Good. So now we have a nice layer in the background. All right, I'm going to toggle to the exercise directions. And then the next thing that we'll be doing is the data management analysis. Good. The key element here, most of these are going to be optional, and they're going to remain optional today because I want to get to the funnest stuff, at least what I find to be the most fun. But there's one thing that we do have to set our data up, one more step before we can really dive into the cool cartography stuff. And that is we need to subset our LREC trees. So I'm going to turn on the trees again. And what we see here is that there's a lot of points and more than we need. We're really just mostly interested in that one field because that's where the packline data came from. If we right click on those trees, you'll see attribute table that's available. And let's click on that. So right click LREC trees and then left click the attribute table. And what you'll see is that you have a whole bunch of trees that are, all these trees are available. And each one of these points has all these attributes. So this one field, number 2, FID, represents one tree within this data set. And each one of those trees has road information, column information, variety, rootstock, field. And field is the one that we're going to be largely interested in. Oh, we have a question. Cecilia, you have a question?
Yes, I do. So I'm not sure if I did this right, but I had loaded my LREC trees from the ArcGIS online, and now
Okay.
it doesn't have an attribute table.
Really? Oh.
So I guess I'll try to use the data that came with that we already pre-downloaded, but I'm just letting you know.
Okay, good. If anyone else has that problem, I mean, you know, I love Shane's comment. He said at one time is working with GIS is almost an exercise in insanity because you can do the same thing 5 times and on the 6th time, for some unknown reason, it just won't work. And then it'll work the 8th and 9th time. It's just, you never know. So yeah, it's work. So maybe there's a connectivity problem or whatever to the underlying tree data. But yeah, if you have that problem, everyone, you can go to, you can insert, you can go add your data from your catalog. You can go to your catalog pane in your folders, project folders, and down at the bottom, the LREC trees is, you can bring it in from there as well. Just in case something like this happened, we added it in there. Good. I'll give you a second to do that. We're doing okay on time today. Good. So I mentioned before, field is what we're going to be most interested in. See, now I've highlighted one of these, and this is selected. Just a kind of a side note, well, it's an important side note, is that if you do any kind of analysis or export or anything of your data, when there's anything highlighted, it's only going to process or analyze or export that one selected or that group of selected features. So before I do anything, I need to clear that out. And so there's this clear option here I can select, and it'll clear that selected field. There's also, if I was up in map, I could have clicked the clear option up here. But yeah, so that's but yeah, I'm going to want to select now a group of trees that I want, and specifically the F64 trees. And the way to do that is I'm going to select by attribute. So everybody, if you haven't got there yet, for anybody that had to go bring in their trees layer here, we're going to right click this, bring up your attribute table of the LREC trees. And then once we've brought up the attribute table, we're going to go down, select by attributes. Just click this option. By default, it should be new selection. And then we are going to select a field, and the field's going to be field, literally. begins with is what we want. F64. Oops, 64. Dang it, typo. W. F64W. And click apply. And then OK. Now, if I look at this, oops, if I can get my zoom out of the way, what I should see is 307 features selected. And at the bottom, you can toggle back and forth between the selected and not selected options. Now, what I want to do is I'm going to kill two birds with one stone right now. And the exercise, it gives you like further information about how to do this. I'm going to zoom in first so you can see all of those trees for that field are selected now. The directions gives you kind of extra information about how to reproject your data. These trees, if I looked at them, don't worry, information only right now, so you don't have to do this. I'm going to right click, go down to properties and source. Yes, so source, URL, geometry, spatial reference. And I'll see that, yep, as I recalled, it was WGS, or World Geographic System, 1984 Web Mercator. That is not the coordinate system of the drone data. If we are going to do more robust analysis, we want to make sure that that matched with the drone data. I think Shane has a story of someone that did their whole thesis and turned out that their finished product at the end was all wrong because they had two mismatching data sets and they had to go back and redo all their analysis. It quite a lot of probably stress. But anyways, so just as a heads up, yeah, having this match the other day you're going to do coinciding analysis with is important. But the way we can do that though is now that these are highlighted, we can export that into our project. And the way I do that is go over to trees, right click, go down to data, and export features. So just in case someone missed that, I'm going to go to the, now that when this is now highlighted, these 307 trees, right click, data, export features, down kind of by the bottom, and click that, LREC trees. It even gives us a prompt now in the newer version. Input has a selection, records will be processed 307. They didn't used to have that little prompt. It's nice. So there's so it'll only export those trees that we want. In this case, because we can change the output name to something like F64 West trees underscore UTM, and I'll show you why it's going to be UTM. And what this is going to do is we don't need to have this file be kind of external that we could just email to someone or so forth. We can leave it in our geodatabase, which is denoted by this GDB at the end of this long thread of information here. And so at the very end of it, after the backward slash, we'll just do F64 West trees UTM. And then before we finish and say, okay, I want to go up to environments. So see environments at the top, click on that. And under this, you'll have output coordinate system. This is where you can reproject your data at the same time you're exporting it. If you're adept at coordinate systems, what you can do, and don't do this right now, but you can watch, I could go over to the sphere and then navigate down to the coordinate system that I want. I know that this is what the drone data is in, and I would have to go down to all the way to here to select it. A much easier way to do it though, cancel that. I can just do the drop down, and this is what the directions call for, is do the drop down and just select current map. Since the first layer that I put in already had this coordinate system being the mosaic, now this is just a kind of a quick way of getting to this, what I just navigated all the way through those like multitude of coordinate systems to get to the UTM zone 11 north. Now, if I go to parameters, this tree file will only export the 307 that I want, giving it this name, and it'll be in UTM because I set it here, and then I can click OK. Good. Now you see that one's at the top. If you go up to your map tab, and in the center, you can click clear, and then you see those trees. We can unclick the LREC trees tab, and then we see just that one popping up. Good. So just those trees. One last step, and then I want to take a break. It's a really quick step. Go over to your view tab if you don't already have your catalog pane up, and open your catalog pane. Go all the way down to your pack line data. Drag and drop that onto your map. Now, if you scroll all the way down to the bottom of your contents, you'll see pack line data CSV file. Since your tree data table is already available right there, we can look at that and see that it has a FID LOREC field ID number, a specific number that's available. If I go down to the pack line data CSV file in your content on the left side, right click on that, and I open it, you'll see that it also has an FID LREC field. That, in theory, should match up to the other the RFID number of the trees. So we can join these two tables together. In this case, this pack line data has weight, diameter, volume, visual grade, and overall roundness. That we can then, but it doesn't have any spatial reference. It's just it's a table, like an Excel table, really. So the way we join that is if we go all the way up to the top of your drawing order in your contents. So just roll it up or drag this up. Right click on that layer. Go down to join and relates and click add join. Now under the endpoint join field, so it already has this one here. It automatically recognized the pack line data because it was, well, it's the other tabular data that matched up to it, fortunately. But the join input join field option, the first one is that FID LOREC. And then it automatically recognized it had a matching one in the other data set. You don't have to validate the join. It might throw an error, but it's fine. It's going to match up, and click OK. Now, what happens is if I go over to this layer, I right click and say open attribute table. What you'll see is the same initial information, but if I scroll all the way over to the far right, look, now each one of these also has that tabular data from the other file. If any of you are researchers, you could probably appreciate how useful this is. If you're like, I use this as an example of a real project that I was associated with a long time ago where they were doing fecal coliform collections out in the field, taking samples from cow patties and then bringing those to the lab and then rematching them up with GPS data at those points at a later time. So you can do lab data and then bring it back to the spatial positioning in this same sort of way. Good. So we have all of this here. Last teeny weeny bit of visualization, and then we'll put our map together, is this. I'm going to close these tabs for now so we don't have that there. We can turn off our rasters for now, turn on our polygons, and say we can turn on, let's not turn on that, let's turn on this. There we go. So we'll turn on the mosaic background. Zoom into that. Let's do a little bit of symbology there, and then we'll be just about a quick break. Good. So what we'll do is we'll click on make sure this layer is highlighted, the trees that we just created out of the join to. We will go up to feature layer, symbology, and you'll see the symbology will pop up over here, but more importantly, we want to click the drop down under the symbology. And what we're going to select is graduated symbols. So the drop down under this one, graduated symbols. And look, you have all of a sudden a color like a yellow value. Luckily, the default, just as fortune would have it for time saving purposes, it pops out pretty nice over that red layer. And even if you do the squint test, which usually is a kind of a way of seeing if it's good for colorblind folks as well, it still pops out pretty well. But it doesn't really make sense with these values because is being represented by the field ID number, but not by something that's really useful. The field that we really want to see, if you go over to the right in the symbology, is the weight. So let's go by weight. So that's the actual weight on average of the fruit that came off those trees. You see some of them are better than the others, or creating more fruit or heavier fruit, as the case may be. So now we have an actual layer of information over this vegetation. At a later time, you could practice playing with the symbology, changing the colors. You can change them individually here, or you can change them individually here. If I clicked on them, you could format the symbol and go in, change it, but I don't really need to do that for today. But let's take a quick break for about 5 minutes, and then we will put the map together and call it a wrap. Sound good? Any questions? So let's be back at like about 3:34. All right, let's finish up. There's in the past sometimes, because there's like 10 gallons of great information to pack into a 5-gallon bucket of time. There's a lot more stuff to cover than time to cover it in. But to try to plan ahead, what I did this time is I had you go through a lot of the steps subtly to prep you for this last cartography section, so it shouldn't take too long. So I kind of streamlined some of the earlier steps to make sure that we could create a neat map. And what we're going to be doing is right now is going to go from what we're looking at right there to what Maggie and I showed you already with this map here. Oops, moving my map sections around. So yeah, so we're going to try to create something like this. It's not as hard as you would think, except for I'm going to skip doing the shadow because that takes a little bit of time. So going back to this, what we'll do first is I'm going to do it like really quick. Go over into the drawing order and down where you have the 64 West field. I want you to right click that and go up and select copy. And then we'll go up to map, right click on map, and then paste. And then so we just added that into the top. What we'll do is we'll turn that on and it covers up our data, but that's okay because what we'll do is we'll click on the symbol below. And you'll see the symbology properties pop up. I showed you before how to go up and click the feature layer and then symbology, but it's easier sometimes is to click on the square. We'll go over to gallery. So we clicked on this here, gallery, and then just click dark black outline. So we just want to accent that a little bit, make it kind of stand out. We can do now is we'll go down to all the way to the bottom, and you'll see that there's these two options at the bottom that are background data. I said that we would come back to this later, and we'll do that right now. What you go is going up to the map tab at the very top. You can select base map, and that shows the background layer surrounding you. You can select imagery, highlight. I think there's 27 of these or 28 of these the last time I checked, 28, I guess. If you can select some of these, I'm just going to select imagery for now. And you'll see if you zoom out, you got a true color background is a base map. Not really, you can't really analyze that, but you have that as a background. That, and I showed you down here at the bottom because now the world imagery is what is available there. That's showing your base layer, but we don't need that at all, actually, for the next step. So we'll click it and turn it off. So it's just a pure white background. We want to have a nice clean map at the end. What we'll do is the catalogs here, we can X out of that. We don't need the catalog pane there. See in the top of the view window. We'll do is we'll go up and click insert and do new layout. Click just new layout. And we'll do the ANSI layout letter landscape and click this. So this is the layout view that we're going to have. Now you have nothing in this, but we can insert a map frame. So under the insert still, under map frame, we'll click on this and you'll see the layer that we already have and we'll click on that. Now we'll have a little crosshairs and you'll see, you might not be able to see it on my screen through the Zoom, but when you do that, when you're adding this new map frame, you go up to the top left-hand corner, click, and then drag all the way down to the bottom right-hand corner. And it should snap to the edges, and then let go of your click, and you'll have that that show up on your screen. Here's the thing, though, is now you're working in a layout view, and so you can't click and move this around. It moves the whole frame. The way around that to be able to adjust the positioning is you right clicks. Hopefully everyone's was able to do that. So we added a layout, we added the map frame, drug from the top left-hand corner down to the bottom. Now we can right click and select activate at the top of that option. And now we can move this around on here. We can zoom in and out. We can set the position. So what I recommend is kind of up a little higher on here, not too high, but so it mostly fills up your window, but not entirely, because we want to leave room for the title down below and some legend and so forth. Cecilia, you have a question?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm in the map frame part still, and I can't get it to show up like yours is. Can you show me again how you did that?
Sure. So you're in here. Go up and click new layout. So top left-hand corner. Letter. I'll create another one. It doesn't matter if I have another layout. Go over, still under insert. We're going to click map frame. So kind of like a third of the way over off the top of the window. Select that and select our map. You'll get a little crosshair, and then you'll be able to drag and drop all the way down across, and then you'll get that to pop in there.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Good. And then for what you can do is you right click and do activate to be able to move it around. I'm going to close this out so I only have one of them in here now. So activate, and once it's been moved, I don't want to continue to scroll around and have it move. So what I'll do is go up to, where's that? Let's see. Oh, I'm still in the map. I'm going to go back to the layout view. Okay, good. So then in the layout view, and I click on layout, I'm going to close activation. So click on the layout and then close activation, and then it'll hold its position. Let's add our map elements in. Let's start out with a legend. How's that sound? So what we'll do is we'll go up to insert on the top tabs and go across, and you'll see legend will be one of the options. Click on this. And then we can just drag and drop a box at the top left-hand corner and you'll see a legend pop in there. The thing though is that you have more options for your legend than you want. The only thing you want is the trees and their weight, correct? So what we'll do is on the left-hand side in the drawing order, we'll expand the legend and let's turn off everything except for the 64 West trees UTM. We turn off everything else in the legend and you'll only have what is really important there. You can play with that a little bit. So we have this trees layer. You'll notice something that's kind of, if you want to have a really nice looking map, you don't like to have those underscores. And by the way, a lot of GIS people put underscores in there because certain processing functions don't like spaces. And so you'll see a lot of underscores. And then you all have all of these decimal places, which are ridiculous. And we don't want that. This is a good moment to point out that all of this is still inherently tied to the map that it's pulling the data from. So this is the layout I mentioned earlier. This is where you put in your elements and on top of the map features that you've done in your map view. So what we'll do to change that is we'll go back to map. Remember this, the F64 underscore UTM. Go back to map, scroll up to the top and see the layer here. Let's click on it once, click on it 2 times slowly, click on it a 3rd time slowly, and let's just put a space instead of those underscores. And now that change will reflect in the legend on the other layout. But before we continue on, let's click outside of it so that keeps, or you can push enter. And now let's get rid of these extra digits. The way you do that is you can double click on the weight to get the symbology to pop up, or you can click on feature layer and symbology, either one, and it'll bring up the symbology of this tree layer. We'll go over to the far right-hand side of the symbology. So you follow that, go click here, click on the weight, the feature layer, the far right, format labels. And let's just reduce this down to 1. And it should automatically do it over here on the left. Now, we go back to our layout view. Look what we got here. We have it looks a lot better now. F64 trees, UTM. We could have changed that name further, but we don't need to. I mean, you might want to give it something more understandable to the viewer, but for now, you get the idea. Let's insert let's see, let's put in a text. Let's put in the dynamic text. And we will do, actually, where's the, let's see, where's the, why the heck is not? Where's it? Oh, wait, what am I doing? I'm getting ahead of myself. There's another part of the directions that calls for dynamic text. And I see that the text information is not there. What we'll do is we'll just click on the rectangle, actually just the text letter, straight text. It's over on the top, kind of 2/3 of the way over. Go over and put a text frame here. And we'll just say, I forget what the name of it is, but I'll bring up my other map to remind myself without going to the directions. It was Lynn Cove Research and Extension Center, Naval Orange Production. So I can just type that in here. And then we could do another text box the same way, but we'd add another text box just because The other one would have different text size font. I'll show you how to adjust that in a moment. There you go. Good. So I put in those texts. So there's text 1 and then the text 2. I think the size of the first text is fine, but the size of the second text is not so good. So if I double click the second text on the side, it'll bring up the symbology options on the right-hand side. And part of that is the text symbol. So if I over here, text 1, which is the second text I put in, the Naval Oranges production, you can see that the letters here, you can adjust them there as well. We'll go up to text symbol. And then appearance. And let's make this something much bigger, like 18, I guess, and click apply. And let's make it 24 or so, 26 maybe, apply. Good, now we have something that's a little better. So I'm gonna close down the symbology and get this in there. So now you can see you have 2 text areas. I can click and drag those just a little bit, just so they're a little bit better spaced. Good. We have the legend. We might want to just space that a little bit better. Good. I might recommend going up and saving the project right now. I always do that just kind of compulsively. And it's taken a while. Good. Believe it or not, we are so close. We're like virtually right here. Then what we'll do is we'll add in a neat line. And the way you add in a neat line is you just add in a box of some sort. So we can add, we can do the expand the graphics. And that's not what I wanted. Where's the, there we go. Usually I can see it. So there's a rectangle that you can add in. So you see up here, if you, I don't know if you can see that or not. On the top of your screen above graphics and text, if you toggle down, you'll have a variety of options, one of which is a rectangle. Click on that, then go down to your map and just drag from one edge all the way across to the other edge of your map. You can zoom in on that a little bit to make it narrower. Shows a nice little clean, neat line. Zoom out of the way. Go up to symbol on the right-hand side because it's already active. The symbology is already there. Let's give it a fill color of whatever you want, maybe black or blue. I'm going to just go with a really dark blue. Click apply. Now if I zoom out, look, I got a nice neat line in between. Let's add in our north arrow. We'll have a map. Now we'll go up here to, I'm going to get my zoom out of the way again. Add in a north arrow. This one's really easy, but we'll do the drop down instead of the default because I like to have just a simple one. I don't like the default all the time. Let's click on the first one of those. Put in a little north arrow. It's pretty good. Let's do a scale bar. So what I did is I did the drop down on the north arrow. Same thing I'll do on the scale bar. Anybody, am I going too quick for anybody? Just go ahead and speak up. So we're just pulling each one of these down one at a time. The scale bar, we can use imperial or we can use metric. What we'll do is just select one of the, say the scale bar 3 and drop that on here. But look, it's in miles. That's sort of ridiculous. We can fix that really easy because by default, the properties will come up. And on the right-hand side, you can switch from miles to feet. And then just drag this over so it actually fits on your map, 60 feet. That makes a lot more sense. So we have a scale bar. Good. And the only other thing that we didn't include there yet was the call out, which we've already got pretty much set up. But it'll just take 2 steps to get that all ready to go. One, we'll go up to the top left corner, new map. Click new map at the top left-hand corner under map or insert. And then what we'll do is go back to our original map and we will scroll down, click on the 64 West field, press Control, click on the LREC boundary, right click and select copy. So 64 West field, LREC boundary, right click and copy. We'll go back to the other map and then right click and paste. But we have to turn those on. The purple's a little weird, so I might change that by clicking on the color. Select the dark background. Click properties. So we select the gallery. I clicked on the boundary, dark outline, and properties. Change that to like kind of a darkish gray, medium gray. And then click apply. I will turn off the world topography in the background. And now, last thing we do is we'll go back to our layout. So what I did is I added in these 2 layers. I copied and pasted them from the other map. And I turned off the world topography. And checking it. Go back to the layout. And we'll go up. We'll add in another map frame. So we're under insert by default. It still probably remembers where you were at. So if you hit not insert at the top, map frame, click on the one that you just created and just drag it over in the corner. It'll take a second for it to render and it'll be all gray because the scale is wrong. I gotta close some stuff and so you can see what we're looking at here. The scale is wrong. So the same thing we had to do before, we'll right click, activate, zoom out until it's right. I do it like that. And then what we can do is we go back up to layout, close activation, stretch this out a little bit so we can see it. And now you have a call out on your map as well. The only thing that I might mention is that you could get rid of that outside edge easily by going into the map frame right here, double clicking on it, and see which one of these. I think it's the pen. Yeah, that's it. You can reduce the outside edge. So if you double click on it over here, click on the pencil and reduce, then you'll see when I click off of this that then it is by itself. We can adjust the text size, but if you look at this, it looks extremely like the map that we have here. We just have to adjust the text size and drag some things around. Good. So I think that's enough for today. I think we got quite a bit done. And with that, I think we'll call it quits. Let you have a fantastic Friday afternoon, and with this beautiful weather, and have a great weekend. And if you have any questions, you can go ahead and throw them out right now. I'll send the evaluation form out to you here in a few minutes. you could please fill that out. That'd be great. We have office hours that you can find on our website. And if you have, throw out your questions and we're happy to answer.
Hey, Sean, someone had a question about getting rid of service credits, or that service credits was showing up.
Service. Oh, it
Not
was showing
service
up.
credit. Yeah.
I don't know why it didn't show up on mine.
You removed your base map.
Oh, okay. Service credits. If that is an issue, that's a great question. What you do is you will go up to, it used to be under view, but now it's under insert. Go over to dynamic text. And then you go down to, where is it at? It's
Service layer credits,
where,
I believe.
There you
yes.
Right there.
Yeah,
Yep.
right there.
Down.
Service layer credits. That's it. Yeah. Rolled right past it. And then what
Or
you
you
would
can
do,
just take off your base map.
yeah, or you can
Right.
take off your base map like I did. But if you had your base map on there, you just do that and then you click outside and then it'll move your service credits off of your window.
I think Aviana, is your hand up?
Yes, just a quick question. If I'm taking this class right now at Cal State and I'm kind of near Berkeley, is there any way I could meet somebody like in person? It's so hard. I didn't realize this subject is so specific that most people don't. Finding a tutor is so hard.
Same
We
for
don't really
me.
do in-person stuff. It's mostly online office hours.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
I think start there, Aviana. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Santa Cruz used to do classes, but it hasn't happened for a long time.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah,
But
we do.
good luck in class. I'm psyched that you're taking that class.
We also have we have our office hours and we have additional trainings too. And we don't have it coming up yet, but probably early next year, we'll have our cartography workshop as well, which is an extension of this. So that might be of interest to some of you.
Thank you so much. Have a great day.
All right. Thank
Have a
you
great
all.
weekend, you guys.
Take care, everyone.
Take care, all.